Hey, this past week, not necessarily the best week for our picks. This was our first official losing week on the books. Let me go through, update everybody with what we did last week. And if you were new here, which I'd be surprised if that many of y'all are, I mean, we are going through, and every single week this year, we are going to go look at some player props. We're going to be putting money down on Underdog Fantasy. Of course, if you want to go look at any of these props yourself, go to Underdog Fantasy. You can find the link in the description of the video. You can find that down there in the comment section. And when you go to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK and make a $10 deposit, A, you support this channel more than you would ever believe, and B, you get a max deposit bonus as well when you use promo code FLOCK. So make sure you go out there, support the channel in that way. Now let me pull up the results for our Pick'em Challenge, and I believe we officially lost. Let me double check. Yeah, so let's go through and show off. We didn't necessarily lose big because we did get this $120 bet through with Ruggs, Bridgewater, and Sutton. But outside of that, I mean, you're going to see a lot of red. And keep in mind, when we're going through and when we're making these bets, you just kind of have to have one or two of these hit when you're making the parlays. And if you get one or two of them to hit, then you're going to be perfectly fine, because it doesn't matter if it's minus 20, minus 20, minus 20, minus 20, minus 20. I mean, all these minus 20s equal that 1 plus 120. Now, this past week wasn't necessarily fantastic. Y'all are going to see a ton of red. Let's get down here, see the plus 150. Get down here. We're going to have to load a lot more. I'm just going to give you all an update from everything that we have made this entire year. Just that way we can be very transparent, because I'm not coming out here and acting like we are going to be extremely profitable. The big thing that you're doing with player props is you're trying to have fun sports betting, and knowing that we are a lot better at player props than we are going to be at picking spread. So we're still profitable this season. And let's go through, let's check out some of these props that we can be looking at. And our first game that we're going to be looking at will be the Kansas City Chiefs and the Tennessee Titans. And you probably saw this whenever we shared our screen previously, but a big thing that I advise y'all to do, a big thing that I'm doing on my own, is I am not wanting to come out here and then just pick a bunch of random lines from a bunch of random games and go, okay, I like the over on Jerick McKinnon, I like the over on Michael Carter, and make a ticket slip this way. Because honestly, you're not necessarily taking advantage of the system if you're doing it that way on Underdog Fantasy. A big thing that you can do instead is you can go and look at how you can correlate your picks within one player ticket. So say right now, you really like this over on Patrick Mahomes at 324 passing yards. If you like this over and you're going to take the over from Mahomes at 324 passing yards, that also makes it more likely that you get the over for either Mecole Hardman, Travis Kelce, or Tyreek Hill hitting. So then you would most likely want to take another over there. And if they continue to have to throw the ball in this game, we know it will most likely be a higher scoring game in general. So then you would most likely want to take the over on Tannehill, or you could do it the exact opposite. You could go take the unders if you're going to be expecting it to be a low scoring game. Now with this contest in general, I know that we are going to get a lot of hate for doing this, and if we were making this bet consistently over the past few weeks, I mean, we would have been getting crushed. But I think we may look to take the under on the Tennessee Titans, Derrick Henry. I mean, at 122 rushing yards with Derrick Henry here, this is just a very aggressive mark for any running back. Of course, if there's going to be anybody who can get there, it would be Derrick Henry. If this was total yards, 100%, I think that we would actually be taking the over. And if you're looking at Derrick Henry over what we have had with the past few weeks, is a running back at 143, 130, 157. I mean, he's only had 2 weeks where he did not get to 122 rushing yards. That was week 1 against the Cardinals and week 3 against the Colts. But I would expect in this game in particular, you are going to have the Tennessee Titans possibly having to throw the ball through the air. So if that's going to be our expectation, we're going to expect this to be a high-scoring contest in general, and this could be a slight shootout. I think that we may want to take the under on Henry, the over on both Tannehill and A.J. Brown, and then if we're going to be expecting this to be that high-scoring game, we're also going to want to take an over on the Kansas City Chiefs side of the ball. Now, exactly where we're going to go, it's a little bit of a different story. I mean, here with Kelce, here with Tyreek Hill, not necessarily picks that I'd love. I think we just take the over with Patrick Mahomes himself. And I know the chances of all this happening, they're pretty damn low. Like we showed you at the beginning, you're going to lose a ton of these. I mean, you can lose a ton. You just have to need to win a few. So we're going to bet 15 to win $150 on this bet in particular. So we're taking the under on Derrick Henry and then essentially betting that this game is going to turn into a shootout here. Now, our next game will be with the New England Patriots and the New York Jets. Honestly, I'm going to be expecting this to be a very low-scoring contest. I've had a lot of people asking us about this game and what it means for Michael Carter. I mean, if we're going to be looking in general, I think one thing that we would try to do is we would try to take the under on Mac Jones at 250 passing yards. Seems like a pretty aggressive mark, but the problem is when we go through and when we try to create another bet with this, I really don't like any of the other unders. I mean, I guess we could go with the under on Jacoby Myers, but Myers has had so much volume in New England at the same time that I don't necessarily think that's going to be a great spot to get the correlation in. Instead, maybe we want to go through and take some unders on what we'll have with the New York Jets side of the ball. I mean, let me go through and pull up what we have actually had from these wide receivers in Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder as of late. Now, keep in mind, Jamison Crowder, of course, was injured to start the season, so we don't have a full season sample on Jamison Crowder, and this team is coming off a bye. But here, so far, I mean, you've had Jamison Crowder getting a decent amount of targets in this offense, but keep in mind, targets for Crowder are going to come at a lower efficiency mark than you'd expect an average wide receiver. I mean, he's had 61 receiving yards, and then he had 24 receiving yards this past week against the Falcons. Honestly, even though he'll have a lot of targets, we know that his yards per target are going to be very low. And a tough matchup, let's just take the under on Jamison Crowder and the under on Zach Wilson, expecting this to be a low-scoring game. And yeah, we can go through, bet $15 on this one. This is only going to be to pay out 90. You know what? Let's get that up to 100 just for fun. Let's bet 17 to win 102. So like I said, I mean, a lot of these we're going to lose, but it's just about the odds. It's just about getting the correlation in, talking about what you expect from the overall game flow, and then you can go through, make that bet this way. Now, Lamar Jackson, over 302 total yards. This is a no-brainer bet. I mean, with Lamar Jackson, we're expecting the passing volume to take a dip down compared to what it's been as of late. But still, with Lamar, literally, there's only been 1 week that he has not hit this mark. I mean, every single week, he's up there at 330 to almost 400 total yards this season. Of course, we're expecting slight regression, but still Lamar Jackson, I think that over is going to be fantastic. And if we're going to be betting the over on Lamar, we should expect this is going to be a very competitive game. So I think we're actually probably going to bet the over on Joe Burrow at 259 passing yards at the same time. And I really like this over on T. Higgins. Now, the question is, are we going to go with receptions? Are we going to be going with yards overall? If you're looking at what we have had from T. Higgins so far this season, I mean, he has hit 58 receiving yards only twice this year. I mean, but receptions, on the other hand, this is a wide receiver that had 4 receptions week 1, 6 receptions week 2. Keep in mind, he missed 2 weeks due to injury. He's had 5 receptions. So I think receptions are actually probably a little more likely for T. Higgins rather than the receiving total. So let's go with the Joe Burrow, T. Higgins over, and Lamar Jackson's over at the same time. Let's go through and get that $15. And you know what? No, let's bump this up to 20. I actually really like this game to go through and target. We'll bet 20 to win 120 here. Now, our next game we're going to be looking at will be Taylor Heineke and the Washington football team going up against the Green Bay Packers. And honestly, I think we're probably just going to avoid this game. I mean, I guess we could take the over on Heineke and Terry McLaurin if we were expecting that this is going to be a game that possibly is a higher scoring contest. Now, in the case of A.J. Dillon, I know he has had a decent workload over the past few weeks, but still you're not necessarily expecting him to be a running back that is getting much usage in a close contest. I mean, you've been seeing A.J. Dillon get a ton of carries in blowouts here. If we would have another line on Aaron Rodgers for passing yards, I think that'd be really intriguing to look at. But for whatever reason, we currently don't have one. I'd imagine that they put one up tomorrow morning or maybe even an hour after this video's out. But a bad thing is, we're live streaming right now. I'll probably make some bets tomorrow morning on the live stream on the main channel. But for this video in particular, we can't go through and look at that. So I think we're most likely going to be going with the Davonte Adams over here. And with Davonte Adams, he's hit 100 receiving yards 3 weeks this season. He's missed it 3 weeks as well, but I mean, that 1 week that he missed it in week 1 against the New Orleans Saints, I think that's not really predictable what you may have going forward. So if we're going to be betting that this is a higher scoring game in general, let's take the over on Davonte Adams and the over on both Heineke and McLaurin. And I really hope that y'all are getting a decent sense on how we are going through and how we are making these bets. We are just trying to get correlation in. That's the way you can, I don't want to say cheat the system with underdog, but definitely have a slight advantage. Now, they do not have Jalen Waddle or Devontae Parker listed as of yet because Devontae Parker currently is questionable. Calvin Ridley at 74.5 receiving yards is a line that I 100% want to be chasing. I mean, with Calvin Ridley here, This is a wide receiver that has averaged almost 11 targets a game. Now, he's only hit 74.5 receiving yards once this season so far, and that was against the Jets back in week 4. The previous 3 weeks, he was anywhere between 50 and 65 receiving yards. But I think if you're chasing volume, this Calvin Ridley line is going to be very appealing to go after. Kyle Pitts, at the same time, I think that we're definitely going to make a bet on this tomorrow morning, but the problem is making one right now is just a little bit tougher when we don't have the options of Jalen Waddle, Devontae Parker, because I don't want to be making one now and then look back tomorrow morning and really like the line on Waddle that we're going to get. So we're going to pass on that game for now. Now our next game will be the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. And very similar, the Giants, I mean, you just don't have many options given all the injuries in this offense. And I hate to say it, but with these games that you don't have many options, I'm just going to be avoiding. Let's slide past this one. Let's go to a game where there are a ton of lines for us to look at in the Philadelphia Eagles and the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'm very surprised to see 65.5 rushing yards for Miles Sanders. I mean, if this was going to be total yards, hell yes, I would go through and I would take the over on Miles Sanders every single day of the week. But if we're looking at that being just rushing yards in particular, Miles Sanders has played 6 weeks so far. Miles Sanders has gotten to 65.5 rushing yards one time in those 6 weeks. I 100% think that we need to be taking the under on Miles Sanders here. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that this is going to correlate with much else. Derek Carr, 290 passing yards, maybe another intriguing spot to take the under. The problem is, where could we find another line for one of these receivers to take that under with? I think we're probably going to go Derek Carr under 290 passing yards. And I know he's gotten here a considerable amount so far this season, but keep in mind, Derek Carr is also A, playing with the new head coach, and B, this is someone that has played a decent amount of time in overtime. I mean, over the past 3 weeks, Derek Carr has gotten to 290 passing yards just once. It was this past week against the Denver Broncos. I will be expecting some regression overall to Derek Carr. Now, if we're going to be trying to find another wide receiver to package Derek Carr with for this under, because once we take that under for Derek Carr, we have to take an under for a wide receiver. That's the rule that we are putting on ourselves, because if this bet's going to work out, we know that Derek Carr probably has to pass for just, say, 240 passing yards. And if we're going to be pulling up Henry Ruggs has gotten to 53.5 receiving yards pretty much every single week so far this season. He's missed it 2 weeks total, and one of those weeks he missed it by 2 yards. So don't necessarily want to be taking that under on Henry Ruggs. On Hunter Renfrow, this is another wide receiver that, I mean, at 55.5 receiving yards, it's hard to take the under. Over the past 3 weeks, you definitely have seen the production dip slightly, very similar to Jamison Crowder. This will be someone that's getting a decent amount of targets in his offense, but the problem is the yards per target is going to be very low with the overall role that he is playing. And then in the case of Darren Waller, I mean, 65.5 receiving yards. He has actually not hit this mark once in the past 5 weeks, which is crazy to say. I mean, for a fantasy football standpoint, I love Darren Waller, but I think we're probably just going to end up having to take the under here, even though the volume has been there for him as of late, and I don't necessarily love this line with Darren Waller. If we're trying to find some correlation and put him in there with Derek Carr, we're probably just going to want to take that under. So let's grab that really quick. We're going to bet 17, because we're going to bet 17 probably on all these bets from here on out, unless there's something that I love that we see. Then we can go through and we can try to put some more money on it. Now, DeAndre Swift, 45.5 receiving yards. Very rarely are you going to be looking at a running back that actually has a line for what he's going to get in the receiving game here. And obviously a tough matchup against the Rams. But with DeAndre Swift, with the usage in the receiving game, the matchup itself doesn't necessarily matter as much. Now, this is right about where DeAndre Swift is pretty much every single game. 43 receiving yards last week, 53 the week before that, 33, 60. 41, 65. I think this is kind of right in line with what you would expect from DeAndre Swift. Don't love this line. Now, one thing that's really intriguing is if we go down, if we look at this Los Angeles Rams situation, they have almost Cooper Kupp for 100 receiving yards, Robert Woods for almost 70, Tyler Higbee for 40.5. I mean, it seems very aggressive to have all these players this high. I mean, Tyler Higbee in particular, this has been someone playing almost every single snap for the Rams, but at the same time, he has gotten past 40.5 receiving yards once this year, and that was back in week 1. So we're probably actually going to be taking the under on Tyler Higbee, because he would have missed this 5 out of 6 weeks so far. But the problem is, like, we really don't want to be taking this under on Matthew Stafford. And that with Matthew Stafford, I mean, you'd imagine that he has no problem moving the ball down the field against the Detroit Lions. And at the same time, we have seen before that, I mean, the Los Angeles Rams aren't necessarily an offense that is going to be drastically changing the way they play in the fourth quarter if they get that large lead. Now we're going to be looking at Robert Woods as well. Robert Woods has only hit this over one time this season. I mean, I think that these unders for Robert Woods and Tyler Higbee, these are super appealing, right? I think these are profitable bets. The problem is I don't like taking the under on Matthew Stafford, but we realistically have to ask ourselves, I mean, is it smart to not take the under on Matthew Stafford if we're taking the under on Woods and Higbee? Now, I understand it's possible for Stafford to get to 300 passing yards, even if Woods doesn't get to 70 and if Tyler Higbee doesn't get to 41. But is it likely? That's an answer. I don't necessarily think so. So I don't love this under on Matthew Stafford. It's more about trying to get the unders in with Robert Woods and Tyler Higbee and making it make sense on this one ticket. Now, if we're going to be looking at the opposite side, I think it's really easy. We just take the under on Jared Goff, assuming that this is going to be a lower scoring game in general, or maybe you just have Darrell Henderson getting all the work here. And yeah, we'll go through and we'll just bet 17 to win 170. Actually, no, you know what? Let's bump that up to 20 to win 200. Of course, it's not likely, but we're out here just with our process. It's worked every single week so far this season, besides last week. Last week was pretty damn ugly for us. But outside of that, I think that we've been crushing with this same process. And yeah, between Chicago and Tampa, just because they don't have the line out right now of Antonio Brown with if he's going to be good to go. They also don't have Mike Evans. They don't have Chris Godwin. And when we don't really have those options, I don't want to be betting any. I don't want to be just picking between Brady and then the Chicago Bears. We'll wait until tomorrow morning. Very similar with this Arizona game. I mean, with Arizona, they literally just have the line of Kyler Murray up. Not going to be betting a game that only has one player in it. And of course, Underdog Fantasy has a bunch of NBA props at the same time. Now, I'm going to say I'm not nearly smart enough to go through and bet these NBA props, and we're not going to be looking at those. They have some college football props up as well. So make sure you go use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. Find that link in the live chat. Find that link in the description of the video. I truly appreciate everybody coming out and supporting the channel. If you have not already, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe, even though I'd imagine everybody watching this is already subscribed. And yeah, that's all I got for you. Have a great day. Best of luck with your prop bets. Remember, I mean, we're having fun here. This is not necessarily you going to get rich. It's more so us just coming out, wanting to have some fun, wanting a little extra action on these games. And that's all I got for y'all. Have a great day, and I'll see y'all with the live stream, hopefully tonight on the main fantasy